She's really marrying him with one hand? That's the first thing I heard when I walked into my own wedding. The room went quiet for half a second, just long enough for the whispers to echo. I remember the chandeliers glowing warm above the tables, white roses lining the aisle, the smell of champagne in the air. It should have felt beautiful, but it didn't. Every laugh, every glance felt sharp, like they were waiting for me to trip and prove them right. Eli's hand, his one hand, squeezed mine. His palm was cool, calloused, steady. I looked up at him in that crisp army uniform, the sleeve of his left arm neatly pinned. He looked proud, strong, and all I could think was how proud I was to stand next to him, until I saw my mother's face. Linda stood by the cake, pearls around her neck, pretending to smile. But her eyes, cold, disapproving, scanned the crowd like she wanted to make sure everyone knew this wasn't her idea. Then, right as a few relatives lifted their glasses for a toast, she leaned forward and said it. "You're embarrassing all of us." Just like that, no hesitation, loud enough for the whole table to hear. The clinking stopped. I heard someone choke on their drink. My throat tightened. My face burned. I tried to laugh it off, but my voice cracked. "Mom, please." She just sipped her wine. Across the table, my cousin leaned toward another guest and whispered, "Poor girl, she could have done better." I felt my stomach twist. The music played on, soft jazz, cheerful, completely wrong for how the room felt. My fingers trembled around the stem of my glass. Eli's grip tightened again, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone. But in that moment, surrounded by people I'd known my whole life, I had never felt more alone. Then Rachel's voice cut through the noise. My sister, the perfect one, the one who always had something cruel ready to throw. She leaned back in her chair, smiling like she was watching a comedy show. "What's next?" she said, loud enough for the table behind her to hear. "A GoFundMe honeymoon?" Laughter, a few gasps. Someone muttered, "Rachel!" But it didn't matter. They were laughing. At me. At us. I froze. My chest felt tight, my face hot. Because I wasn't calm. I was shaking inside my wedding dress. My heart was pounding so loud I couldn't hear the music anymore. The room felt heavy, suffocating. I could smell the perfume, the wine, the food, but it all felt far away, like I was underwater. I wanted to run, but I didn't. I sat there, smiling through clenched teeth, pretending this was what happiness looked like. Every time someone came to congratulate us, I could see their eyes flicker down to his sleeve, the missing arm, the metal clip, the polite half-smile they gave before turning away. It wasn't a wedding anymore. It was a performance, one where I was the fool who didn't realize she'd married below her level. Someone at the next table whispered something about charity, and I caught Rachel smirking. My stomach dropped again. I pressed my nails into my palm until I felt pain. At least pain was real. At least it reminded me I could still feel something besides humiliation. The rest of the evening blurred together. Speeches I didn't hear, laughter that didn't sound real, flashes from cameras that made me flinch. At one point, Eli stood to greet a few of his old army friends who had come to surprise him. They hugged him, clapped his back, called him hero. I saw their faces, real pride, real warmth, and for a moment I could breathe again. Then I caught my mother watching me from across the room, her arms folded, her expression hard as stone, that same look she gave me when I brought home a report card with 1 B instead of straight A's. Disappointment, the kind that says, "You've failed me." And right then I realized, no matter what I did, she would never see Eli the way I did. When the night finally ended, guests started leaving, drunk on champagne and gossip. I stood near the door, thanking them, pretending not to notice the sideways glances or the half-hearted smiles. Rachel passed by, brushing my shoulder as she whispered, "At least it was entertaining." I froze again. That one line, that little smirk, burned more than all the whispers combined. When she walked away, I felt my knees weaken. Eli stepped beside me, wrapping his arm, his only arm, around my back. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I nodded because what else could I say? And deep down, I already knew. This wasn't just a bad wedding night. This was the beginning of something worse, something I couldn't name yet. I didn't know it then, but that night, they didn't just laugh at my husband. They erased me, too. The week after the wedding felt like waiting for a storm that never arrived. I kept my phone on the kitchen counter while I washed dishes, while I folded laundry, while I tried to eat breakfast without tasting anything. It didn't ring. No congratulations, no, you looked beautiful, nothing. I refreshed my notifications until the screen burned my eyes. Friends from work left sweet comments under our photos. My family stayed quiet like we were strangers. Eli noticed me standing over the sink with a towel in my hands long after the plates were dry. He nudged my arm with his elbow, light and careful. "You want coffee?" "Maybe later," I said, even though I'd already had 2 cups and felt the jitter in my fingers. That afternoon, I typed a simple text to my mother. "Hope you liked the ceremony." I read it aloud to Eli before I hit send. He gave me a small nod like, yes, that sounded kind and normal. I set the phone down and tried not to stare at it. The screen stayed dark. 2 days slid by. I sent another message with a picture of us in our tiny living room, still in our dress shoes because we hadn't taken them off after church. Eli laughed at his own crooked tie. I wrote, "We're good, Mom. How are you?" 10 minutes later, her reply popped up. "You made your bed. Lie in it." I didn't breathe. The phone slipped in my palm and hit the carpet. Eli looked up from tightening a loose screw on a chair leg. I forced out a sound that didn't sound like words. He picked up the phone, saw the text, and set it back in my hand like it might break. "Let's eat," he said quietly. He opened the fridge and pulled out leftovers, moving slower than usual. He didn't push me to answer. He didn't pull the words out of me. He just warmed the food and put a fork in my hand. The next morning, I called my dad. He picked up on the 3rd ring. I could hear the TV in the background and the clink of a glass on the coffee table. "Hey, Dad." "Hey," he said, as if we were neighbors passing on the sidewalk. "How's the weather over there?" "It's fine," I said. "How are you?" "How's Mom?" "Busy," he said. "We've got a lot going on." He didn't ask about the wedding. He didn't say Eli's name. He asked about traffic. He asked if I'd tried a new barbecue place he'd seen on the news. I waited for him to say he was proud. I got silence, then a rushed, "I've got to run. Talk later." He hung up before I could say anything else. He never called back. By the end of the week, my Facebook was a split screen of 2 different lives. On one side, our friends from church posted us dancing and laughing and cutting the cake. On the other, my mother posted photos of my brother Ryan's birthday dinner. A long table, big smiles, balloons, a cake the size of our coffee table. Dozens of comments. "So proud. Handsome young man. He's going places." My name didn't show up once. If anyone asked about me, it didn't show on the surface. That night I scrolled the album, tapping each photo to see who was tagged. My chest tightened when I saw my mother's caption. "Family dinner. Nothing better." I read it 3 times. I don't know what I expected. Maybe a single emoji, a heart, a wish you were here. There was nothing. "Come sit," Eli said from the couch. He had a blanket over his lap and a steaming mug on the table. His hand patted the cushion beside him. When I sat, he tucked me in like I might break apart if he didn't hold me together. I tried calling the house later. The machine answered with the same clipped tone as always. "We're busy. Call back later." I called again the next evening. My mother picked up. "Mom, hi." "It's me. We're having dinner. Talk later." "Wait, can we just—" The line went dead. I held the phone to my ear a few seconds after the call ended, because the silence felt less cruel than the click. Eli watched me set the phone down like it weighed too much. "Walk with me?" he asked. We circled the block while the sun sank behind the roofs, the heat slipping out of the day. I didn't cry. I felt the tight burn behind my eyes, but the tears didn't come. My body kept moving, step after step, as if it knew if I stopped I'd fall apart on the sidewalk. The next afternoon, I wrote thank you notes by hand. I laid them out on the table, thick cards, neat envelopes. I addressed one to my parents with careful letters like I was back in grade school and wanted a gold star. Thank you for being there. It meant a lot to us. I added a small photo and sealed the envelope with a calm I didn't feel. Eli carried the stack to the mailbox with me. He let me drop them in. Days turned into 2 weeks. Nothing came back. No call, no card, no empty acknowledgement to say, we got it. I tried again, this time dialing my dad while Eli was out picking up a part for the car. He didn't answer. I left a message. Hi, Dad. I love you. I listened to my own voice after I hung up, thin and shaky, like I had a cold. Saturday morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing. For a second, I thought it was my mother. It was a group text from my cousin. A photo of a backyard full of folding chairs and string lights. Everyone was there. My parents, Ryan, my aunts, my uncles, my grandmother in her favorite shawl. A banner on the fence read, Family Night. No one had invited me. Eli shuffled into the kitchen in a t-shirt and sweatpants, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Morning, he said. He kissed my forehead and reached for the coffee pot. I turned the screen so he could see. My hand was steady until he put his arm around me. Then it started to shake. He looked at the photo. He didn't say, I'm sorry, or that's awful. He just set the mug down and pulled me into his chest. I felt the weight of him, the warmth, the solid press of his shoulder under my cheek. My phone buzzed again. Another photo. My mother laughing with her head back. Ryan blowing out candles. My dad pouring drinks. The caption under the last photo read, All together at last. I stood there with my face pressed against Eli's t-shirt until the cotton turned damp. That night, Eli made tea and handed me a mug. We'll make our own family, he said. It wasn't sentimental. It sounded like a plan. I wrapped both hands around the mug and nodded because I wanted to believe it. He leaned back and let me lean into him. We watched some mindless show, and when I laugh-snorted at a joke that wasn't even funny, he grinned like I'd just come back from far away. But the quiet after the credits felt different. I set my phone on the coffee table screen up, like a lighthouse I could watch from the couch. It lit up twice, 2 junk emails. I turned it face down. I tried to keep my days full. I sorted the last of our wedding gifts on the kitchen floor and wrote down who gave what so I could send any missing thank yous. I started a grocery list and put it on the fridge. I suggested we invite a couple from church for dinner next week. When Eli came home with grease on his forearm and a tired smile, I wiped his skin with a warm cloth and told him dinner would be ready in 10. He caught my wrist gently. You don't have to pretend. I'm not pretending, I said, though my voice said otherwise. He kissed my forehead and didn't push. Late one evening, I tried one more time. I dialed the home number and listened to it ring. My dad picked up, surprise in his voice like he hadn't seen the caller ID. I asked if we could come by for a quick visit next week. He paused. I heard the TV again, a muffled laugh track. Not a good time, he said. We've got plans. Ask your mother. Okay, can I talk to her? She's busy. I'll wait. She doesn't want to talk, honey. He didn't say it unkindly. He said it like a weather report. We'll call you. Will you? He didn't answer. Take care. The line went quiet. I stared at the wall, listening to the dial tone until it turned into nothing. I felt my throat tighten and forced air through it. Eli stood in the doorway of the bedroom. I hadn't noticed him there. He didn't come closer until I nodded. Then he crossed the room and gathered me in like he was building a shelter around my bones. I started sleeping with the phone next to the bed. It buzzed sometimes in the middle of the night, and I would swipe it open with a hopeful breath. It was always a coupon or a pointless notification from an app I never used. I silenced everything but their numbers and set the phone back down, screen glowing like a tiny square moon on the nightstand. Eli would turn over and tuck a blanket edge under my shoulder, still half asleep, as if he could keep the cold out that way. By the second Sunday, church ladies asked how married life felt. I said good. I said we were happy. They smiled and squeezed my hand and told me to come by the library or the youth room if I wanted to help with something. I wrote my name on a sign-up sheet and pressed the pen so hard it left a dot through the paper. On the drive home, we stopped at the store for milk. I almost walked away from the cart when my screen lit up with my mother's name. I froze in the dairy aisle with that white light on my face and the hum of the refrigerator filling my ears. I answered. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was cool, measured, like she was giving instructions. "Don't call during dinner again. It's rude." I didn't mean to. I just wanted to." "You made your choice," she said. "Live with it." The lump in my throat scraped up like it had edges. A couple pushed past us with a crying toddler. Eli stood a step away, watching my face. I put the phone to my shoulder and said, "I love you." She hung up. I put the milk in the cart with both hands because one hand didn't feel steady enough. Eli didn't speak. He paid at the register while I stared at the pin pad and tried to remember our zip code. The cashier asked if we wanted the receipt. Eli said yes, thank you, and tucked it into his wallet. We unloaded the groceries in silence. I set the milk on the shelf in the fridge and realized I was crying without making a sound. Tears slid off my jaw and into my collar. Eli wiped my cheek with his thumb. "Come here," he said. We stood by the open fridge door, cool air brushing our faces, until I nodded and stepped back. That night I lay in bed with my arms around Eli, listening to the slow rhythm of his breathing. The room was dark, quiet, safe. My phone waited on the nightstand again, black screen turned upward like it could watch over us. At some point I must have fallen asleep because I woke to the faint buzz of a junk email at 2:14 a.m. I turned it face down and stared at the ceiling. I told myself the silence would end. People cool off. Families argue and then make up. That's what people say. I believed it because I needed to. I told Eli we should plan a Sunday cookout. He said sure. I said I would text my parents in the morning. He kissed my shoulder and said, "Okay." I didn't know yet how wrong I was. I didn't know silence could harden into a wall you can't climb, that it could stretch wider the more you tried to cross it. I didn't know that the next time I reached out to my family, I wouldn't be asked. I kept scrolling, thumb steady, mouth pressed tight. There were 30 photos. A tour of the kitchen, the tall ceilings, the backyard for summer cookouts. My mother's bracelet flashed in 3 different angles while she held the key like she'd earned it herself. I set the phone down on the counter and wiped the same clean spot with a towel I didn't need. Eli came in from the small patio with soil on his fingers. He watched me wipe, then watched me stop. "What is it?" he asked. "They bought Ryan a house in Dallas," I said. "They put it on Facebook." He didn't flinch. He washed his hands and reached for 2 glasses. "Water?" "Yeah." I drank half of mine in one go. The cold hit the back of my throat and made me cough. The cough sounded like I wanted to say something else. I didn't. That night, I called my mother. I stood by the sink with the phone on speaker and the faucet running low. "We're thinking of opening a small coffee shop," I said, drying my hands on a dish towel. "There's an empty corner near the bus line. It's not huge. We'd need a little help to get started. Around 8,000. The water hummed. My mother breathed once into the line. "You should have thought about that before marrying a cripple." My hand tightened around the towel. The faucet kept running. I turned it off and let the quiet sit. "He's a certified mechanic now," I said, clipped words, steady voice. "He's working hard every day." "Then let him prove it," she said. "Don't expect charity from us." I heard a glass set down on a table. My father's voice came in flat and measured, the sound of a door closing. "We don't fund failures." The towel twisted in my fist. I looked at the clock on the stove and watched the numbers change while no one said anything. "Okay," I said. "Thanks for picking up." I ended the call and laid the towel on the counter like it might bruise. Eli stood in the doorway of our bedroom, t-shirt soft from too many washes. He didn't ask me to repeat it. He didn't try to fix it. He wrapped his arm around my shoulders and pulled me into his chest. I stayed there until my breathing evened out, then pulled away, set the table, and served dinner. We ate the chicken warm. We didn't talk about the house. 2 days later, my mother texted, "Come for dinner Saturday, family night." The message hung on the screen like a dare. I showed it to Eli. We stepped inside. The house looked the way it always did when my mother wanted to impress people. Candles, spotless counters, a stack of plates that had only ever touched air. At the long dining table, my father poured wine, shoulders square, necktie still straight. My mother touched napkins into perfect squares. She didn't hug me, she didn't hug Eli. "You made it," she said. "Wash up." Dinner began with soft clinks and low talk. Eli sat beside me, careful and quiet, the same calm he carried into every room. Ryan lounged across from us with his elbows on the chair arms like a prince surveying a small kingdom. I passed the potatoes to my father. He took them without looking at me. "So," I tried, gentle and plain, "the house looks beautiful." "Congratulations, Ryan." He smirked. "Thanks. Right neighborhood, right time." He lifted his glass toward my mother. "And right parents." All eyes slid to my mother's smile. She laughed lightly, chin tipped up. My father's mouth twitched into a smirk that wasn't quite a smile. I waited for someone to ask about our week. No one did. I set my fork down. "We found a storefront we like," I said. "Small place, good foot traffic. We've been saving. We're close." I let my hand rest open on the table instead of clenching it into my lap. "I called to see if you could loan us $8,000 to get the lease started." My mother blinked slow. "We all make choices," she said. "You made yours." My father sawed a piece of roast and didn't look up. "We're not a bank." "Come on, Dad," Ryan said, leaning back with a lazy grin. "She just wants pity money." Laughter flickered around the table, quick and mean. One of my aunts said, "Ryan," in a scolding voice that held no heat. He speared another bite of roast and chewed like he'd won something. The knife rested against my plate. My pulse drummed in my fingers where they touched the wood. I reached for Eli's hand under the table. His palm found mine and held steady. His thumb pressed once, a small anchor. I looked to my mother. "It's a loan," I said, a quiet line, even tone. "We'll pay it back." She tilted her head like she was looking at a stain. "You married a man who can't provide." She didn't blink. "No," she said, "I just hate seeing my daughter waste her life." Eli's breath stuttered next to me, then returned to slow and solid. He stayed seated. He didn't beg. He didn't reach for anyone's approval. His hand stayed open under the table where mine had been. That was enough. I reached for my bag. "Thank you for dinner," I said. The words felt dry and exact in my mouth. I took one step, then another. "Don't forget to thank your sponsor," Ryan said behind me, voice low, carrying. A pocket of laughter rose from the end of the table and got swallowed into the room. I kept walking. The hallway seemed longer than usual. The front door felt heavy under my palm. Eli caught up without a sound, his shoes quiet on the wood. We made it to the car. I set the pie on the back seat and closed the door with a soft thud. In the driver's seat, I put my hands on the wheel and stared at the empty street. Eli reached over and rested his hand on my knee. His fingers tapped once, twice, steady rhythm, the way he calmed himself before a hard job. "They'll never see us the way we see each other," I said, voice low, not asking anything from him. "They don't have to," he said. That unadorned sentence did more than any speech could have done. My chest loosened. My eyes stung. I let the tears come. He didn't rush me. He didn't look away. He sat with me inside the small sound of my breathing until the shake left my hands. We drove home with the windows cracked. The night air carried the cut grass smell from someone's yard. Street lights slid over our faces and slipped away. Eli turned on the radio, low, a song from years ago that both of us knew the words to. I sang 3 lines and then stopped because my voice wobbled. He picked up the next line without looking at me, like it was normal to hold someone steady that way. At home, I set my bag on the table and took off my shoes. The living room looked exactly as it had when we left. 2 mugs clean and upside down near the sink, a folded blanket on the couch, a small plant stretching toward the window. I sat and stared at Eli's hands while he locked the door, one strong and scarred, the other sleeve ending neatly at his elbow. Before bed, I folded a dish towel I'd twisted before the call and smoothed it flat on the oven handle. The kitchen looked simple and honest. I ran water over my hands and watched the soap slide away, clear again. Eli turned off the light and waited for me in the doorway. In the bedroom, I pulled the covers up and scooted back to make room for him. He lay down and slid closer until his forehead rested against my temple. We stayed like that, breathing the same pace. My body let go of the last tremor. I reached for his hand again in the dark. "I won't go back for help," I said. "Not after tonight." "Okay," he said. I held his hand tighter, not for comfort this time, but for the small, solid promise of it. One real hand in mine, warm and alive, enough to hold the weight of this night and the next one, too. The house settled around us. The room quieted. My phone buzzed on the dresser. Nothing important, just light flicker in the dark. I didn't reach for it. I sat with the simple truth I could say out loud without shaking. I would not ask them again. And I didn't know it yet, but I wouldn't need to. One day, the door I had closed tonight would be the one they'd stand outside, knocking. They would be the ones asking. We left after that dinner and didn't look back. A week later, Eli and I signed a month-to-month lease on a one-bedroom in South Austin. Low ceiling, drafty windows, thin walls. The kind of place where you hear your neighbors sneeze and your own pipes argue with you. We hauled in 2 boxes of dishes, a thrift store couch, and a little table with a wobble. Eli set his toolbox by the back door and smiled like it was a palace. He cleared a rectangle of dirt behind the building and measured a workbench with a carpenter's pencil between his teeth. He hammered scrap wood together and sanded it smooth. Then he hung a hand-painted sign on the fence. ELI Repairs, honest work, one hand strong. He laughed when I read it out loud. "It's true," he said. "Might as well say it." I picked up an early morning shift at a coffee shop 2 blocks away. Black apron, name tag, burnt fingertips from the espresso wand. In the evenings, I pulled a red hat over my hair and delivered pizzas in a beat-up sedan with a door that stuck when it rained. We fell into a rhythm. I brewed at dawn, he fixed engines. One night he came in late, with grease on his cheek and a dark smear on his shoulder. I helped him pull his t-shirt over his head and saw the raw skin where the harness had rubbed. My hands went soft. I ran a warm cloth over the spot and dabbed it with ointment. "Don't cry, love," he said, brushing my wrist. "I've been through worse." "I know," I said, pressing the cloth in place. "It still hurts." He kissed my forehead and told me to sit while he washed up. He whistled off-key in our broken bathroom and came out wrapped in a towel like the day had never touched him. I tucked the cloth in the laundry pile and set 2 bowls of chili on the table. He ate like he meant it. When he was done, he scraped the bowl with a spoon for every last bit. We counted every dollar. We ate ramen and frozen vegetables and whatever meat was on sale. Eli turned a pile of pallets into a dining table, then shaved a shim from a paint stirrer to stop the wobble. We kept the heater off when it didn't freeze and wore socks to bed. I put an old glass jar on the shelf and wrote "coffee shop" on a strip of tape. Every time I dropped in a 5, Eli tapped the glass with his knuckle and said, "We're getting there." It sounded small. It felt big. Good days came in pieces. A customer left a 20 in the tip jar and winked. The roof didn't leak during a thunderstorm. I learned to pull a clean shot in 8 seconds flat. Eli waved me over one afternoon to listen to an engine purr the way it should. We stood there shoulder to shoulder, just listening. A purr isn't poetry, but it can fill a chest. My family stayed quiet. I checked their pages the way you check a bruise. Careful, annoyed at yourself for touching it. Photos from a Florida beach. White sand, matching hats, sunburned smiles. "Proud of our boy," my mother wrote under a picture of Ryan standing next to a new car. Long threads of praise, little heart emojis, inside jokes from people who never liked me much anyway. No, "How's your new life?" No, "How's Eli?" Just air. I tried once because I still believed in polite updates. "Hi, Mom, we just opened a little shop." I attached a photo of Eli leaning against the fence with that sign. I watched the message change to "seen" and stay that way. A week later, I posted a picture from our grand opening, which was really just 2 neighbors dropping by with a clanking mower and a leaf blower. Friends from church "Let it go," he said. "We'll prove them wrong." His voice had no heat in it. Just wait. He pressed his palm to the back of my head for a second and went back outside to finish an oil change. That night, the wind knifed through the gaps in the window frames. I sat on a plastic chair on the tiny balcony with a mug of tea that had already gone cold. The storefront across the alley flicked its lights off, and the alley sank into that late-night hum only cities know. I held the mug with both hands until my knuckles hurt. No dramatics, no sobbing, just quiet and the taste of old tea. Eli stepped outside in a sweatshirt and draped his jacket over my shoulders. "You cold?" "Just tired." He pulled up another chair and sat close enough for our knees to bump. He took the mug from me and set it on the floor. "They can ignore us," he said, "but they can't erase what we're building." My throat loosened. I didn't answer right away. I slid my hand into his. His skin was rough and warm. I squeezed once. "We'll prove them wrong," I said. "That's my girl," he said, and the wind didn't bite as hard after that. A month later, a man with a baseball cap and a limp knocked on the fence and asked if Eli had time to look at his truck. He stuck out both hands to shake, firm, no hesitation. "Name's Carl," he said. "You a vet?" "Yeah," Eli said. "You?" "Army." 07 Carl's mouth twitched into a smile. "I heard you're good." Eli slid under the truck, asked for a light, and pointed to a crack in a hose. He replaced it with careful movements, adjusting, bracing, tightening, checking twice. When the engine turned over, Carl laughed from deep in his chest. "You've got real courage, son," he said, clapping Eli's shoulder. "I'll send my buddies." He did. 2 days later, a man named Luis arrived with a sputtering sedan. Then a woman named June needed brakes. Then Carl came back with coffee for both of us and a story about a convoy that got stuck in the mud and a mechanic who refused to quit. He said the story reminded him of Eli. I started bringing fresh brewed coffee out to the yard every morning before my shift. Eli would take a sip, wince at the heat, and keep sipping anyway. He called the new customers. He leaned in the doorway, hair damp from a quick shower, t-shirt crooked at the collar. "Damn right we'll get it," he said, grinning. I laughed before I could stop myself. It wasn't a big laugh. It was the kind that sneaks out and changes the air anyway. He walked over, kissed my temple, and went back to his tools like he'd just tightened the last bolt on a long job. We didn't toast. We didn't post about it. I put the money away and taped the jar lid shut so I wouldn't borrow from it for groceries. Eli slid a folded 20 into my palm on his way out the door the next morning. "For the jar," he said. "A guy penned me for honesty." "What did you do?" "Told him he didn't need the new part he asked for." He shrugged. He thanked me with a 20 and a hug. I dropped the bill in the jar and shook it once so the bills settled. We both listened, not for luck, for proof. Family still stayed out of sight unless a new photo of Ryan popped up. I stopped checking as often. I muted notifications for a while and set my phone face down while I worked. When I slipped and peeked, the sting still landed, but softer, like a bruise finally fading. If anyone asked about them at church, I kept it short. "We're not talking much," I'd say, and changed the subject to muffins or weather. Small wins added up. The neighbor who never smiled waved at Eli through the fence. My boss at the coffee shop gave me a set of mugs with tiny chips that customers wouldn't notice. The landlord fixed the heater because Eli rewired a broken light at no charge. We slept better. We woke up tired but not defeated. There's a difference. I took a framed wedding photo down from the wall one night to dust it and held it under the lamp. The smiles looked stiff. I remembered the weight of that day and set the picture on the shelf face down for a minute. Then I turned it upright and put it back where it belonged. I wasn't erasing anything. I was moving forward. By the end of that month, our jar wore a tight ring of fingerprints. I cleaned it with Windex and a napkin and laughed at myself. Eli caught me at it and shook his head. "Fancy money," he said. "Future money," I said. He winked. "Same thing." We didn't win the lottery. We didn't get a miracle call. We worked, we drank. The sky was that plain winter blue you don't write poems about. A bus hissed at the corner. Somebody's dog barked at nothing. It was an ordinary day, and for the first time in months, ordinary felt good. I didn't know what was coming next. I didn't guess at turnarounds or reckonings or public anything. I only knew the jar was filling, the engine sounded right, and the man beside me kept his word. My phone lay quiet on the table inside. I let it. We went back to work. And somewhere between the next oil change and the next latte, I smiled for real. No performance, no mask, just the kind of smile that shows up when you finally believe the road under your feet will hold. I thought the silence from my family would last forever. It didn't. But I wasn't chasing their noise anymore. One day, not far from here, a call would come from their side of the line. It wouldn't be about a photo or a party. They would need something, and they would dial my number first. By the third year, the shop sounded like a steady heartbeat. Doors rolled up at 8, the air turned warm with engine heat, and the lot filled in a neat line. Pickups, minivans, one stubborn sports car that always came back for something new. We'd painted the sign ourselves, Iron Hand Auto Repair, a silver wing behind a steel palm. It looked a little homemade. It looked like us. I worked the counter with a clipboard and a square reader while Eli walked customers through their cars. "You hear that rattle?" he'd say, bending close, listening with his whole body. People watched the sleeve tucked at his elbow, then watched the way he handled a ratchet with perfect control. Their faces changed in small ways, doubt giving up its seat to respect. We had 3 apprentices by spring, Luis on tires, June on brakes, and a kid named Carter who loved electrical work enough to show up early. A college student handled the phones from noon to 3 so I could run parts without missing calls. Every morning before we opened, I swept the office, straightened the business cards, and unlocked the glass door to a soft chime that made me smile. I didn't wake up scared anymore. We were paying our bills on time. We were hiring. We were okay. One morning, a man with a canvas messenger bag came by and flashed a press badge. "We're doing a piece on veteran-owned businesses," he said. "Heard about you, too." The article went up the next week. Iron Hand Auto Repair, turning pain into purpose. The phone rang so much we had to let it go to voicemail for an hour just to catch up. People arrived with muffins and stories. One woman laughed and said, "I read that headline and cried over my coffee." I kept a stack of sticky notes under the keyboard and wrote down names as fast as I could. Right in the middle of that good noise, my phone buzzed with a message from an old friend. "Heard about Ryan," it read. "He lost everything in crypto. Your mom's devastated." I stood behind the counter and read it once. No laugh, no grin, no "I told you so." I tucked the phone away and printed 2 work orders. There was still air in my chest and a lot of cars waiting. The weeks piled up with repair tickets and new customers until a Tuesday afternoon when the caller ID said Mom. The name sat there on the screen, bright and clean, like it had been waiting in the dark. Eli rolled out from under a Subaru and saw me staring. "You gonna answer?" he asked, gentle. "Yeah," I said. I hit the button. "Hey, Mom." Her voice shook at the edges but held its usual steel. "Sweetie, your dad's business is in trouble." Ryan's situation isn't helping. I pressed the receiver closer and leaned against the workbench. The wood felt cold through my shirt. She paused, then took a breath like she was stepping into a pool. "Could you lend us just 20,000? We'll pay you back soon." My hand went numb. I could hear Eli set a wrench down and stand, but he didn't speak. The air in the shop thinned to a quiet layer between us. "You said I was a failure," I said. Silence, then the same old mask. "Don't be ungrateful." "We raised you." Eli took 2 steps and stopped behind me. His presence felt like a wall at my back, solid and calm. I swallowed and kept my voice level. "I'm not ungrateful, Mom. I'm just not blind anymore." I ended the call. No slam, no extra words, just the soft click and the loud sound of my heart. My knees didn't want to hold me for a second. I found the rolling stool and sat, palms open on my thigh. 2 days after that, my mother posted a photo from our old backyard. Me at 10, missing a front tooth, my hair in a crooked ponytail. The caption read, "It's sad when success makes people forget where they came from." The comments poured in. "Praying for you. Some children are just selfish these days." I scrolled to the end without skipping a single line, then set the phone by the keyboard. Eli walked in, wiping grease from his fingers. "They're at it again?" he asked, quiet. "They're at it again," I said. He tossed the towel in the bin, slid an arm around my waist, and pulled me in just enough for my chin to rest against his shoulder. "They're drowning," he said softly. "Don't jump in after them." "They were my family," I said, voice frayed. "We are your family now." My eyes watered, slow, not dramatic. I let the tears land where they wanted, then wiped them with the heel of my hand and went back to the clipboard. One of the inspectors passed us with a box of filters and pretended not to see. That small kindness gave me air. A week later, the paper ran a second piece. From War to Workshop, local veteran inspires community. Someone taped it to the counter with clear packing tape. People pointed and told us about a grandfather who fixed tractors with a pocket knife, a mother who ran a bake shop after losing everything, a coach who taught them to finish what they started. We got 3 handwritten notes in a single day. I read one out loud to Allie while he cleaned a gasket. "Your story reminded me what strength looks like," it said in block letters. "Thank you for not giving up." I printed it on nicer paper and hung it next to the register with a thumbtack. Every time I rang up a job, I saw those words and felt something steady settle back in my chest. The shop kept moving like a well-timed engine. June taught Carter a trick for getting a stuck rotor off without swearing. Luis figured out a brake issue that had stumped a dealership. I built a simple website with hours and prices, then watched the first online appointment drop into our inbox like a small bell ringing for us alone. I didn't block my mother's number. I didn't send a speech. I wrote an email that took 10 minutes and felt like 10 years. "I hope you're okay. We're doing fine." I kept it short on purpose, no anger, no lecture. Sometimes I'd catch him stepping back from a repair and looking at the shop like it was a living thing. Not proud with his chest out, just grateful. He'd see me watching and raise one eyebrow. I'd roll my eyes and shake the appointment book at him until he picked up the pace. We worked. We weren't waiting for anyone to validate us. The applause had been nice. The work was better. The family talk simmered online like a pot left too long. A cousin messaged to check in, which was really a way to ask for gossip. I told her we were busy and hoped she was well. I didn't open the thread again. Little by little, the reflex to prove myself loosened its grip. Choice by choice, I stood still. I didn't pick up the phone when the ID flashed a familiar number at odd hours. I didn't type paragraphs I'd regret. I filled out payroll, stocked the fridge with sports drinks, and taped a schedule to the wall that made sense to everyone. When it rained, I moved cars under the awning and handed out towels. When the sun came back, I opened the doors wide and let the day roll through. Customers kept speaking life over us. A man brought by his teenage son and asked Eli to show him what real work looks like. A woman hugged me at the counter and said, "I read about you in the paper." "Thank you for making me feel safe." I put her note next to the first one and added a second thumbtack so it wouldn't curl at the corners. By Friday afternoon, the lot was empty for the first time all week. I stood in the doorway and breathed. Eli walked up behind me, slipped his hand into mine, and squeezed. No speech, no plan, just a warm grip that said we were here, still here. I powered down the computer and flipped the sign to closed. My phone buzzed on the desk. One new email from my mother. 3 words in the preview. "Call me back." I let the screen dim on its own and tucked the phone under the counter. "I'm going to start on Monday's parts order," I said. "Copy that," Eli said, smiling. We locked up and headed to the truck. The evening felt easy for once. Sky soft, air cool, street quiet. I slid in, buckled, and watched Eli check the mirror with that habitual care he gives to everything that matters. I thought the fight had landed and passed. I thought refusing that loan had closed the keys clicked against my palm. I set them on the counter and kept my voice even. "Where'd you hear that?" "Your mom's post is everywhere," he said. "Everyone's talking." "What post?" He turned his phone toward me. My name sat under my mother's status like a bruise. Some daughters forget where they came from. Some let money erase their hearts. The photo under it was the local paper shot of Eli and me in front of the sign. Comments stacked like a wall. Ungrateful brat. Her poor parents. Fame changes people. I pushed the keys across the counter. "Your car's good," I said. "Have a safe drive." He nodded, glanced at the phone again, and left. The bell over the door chimed like nothing had happened. Outside, Eli rolled out from under a pickup and wiped his hands. "Who was that?" "Customer," I said. "Ready for checkout." I walked to the office and shut the door softly. No slam. I sat, opened my laptop, and typed my mother's name into the search bar. Her post was there, public, shared by 2 cousins and an aunt who always liked drama. A family friend had added a caption. "Family always comes first. Some people forget." My vision blurred. I blinked until the words were sharp again. When the door opened, I snapped the laptop shut and stood up too fast. By noon, the whispers were in the lot. A neighbor waved, then leaned toward another neighbor and cupped her hand to her mouth. A woman I'd seen at church stopped at the counter and tilted her head. "Why would you turn your back on your mother?" she asked. "I didn't," I said, keeping my voice steady. She waited as if I owed her a show, then huffed and left without the oil filter she came in for. At closing, I drove home with the windows cracked and the radio low. Eli followed with the shop truck, pulled in beside me, and carried up a box of filters we'd forgotten to unload. He was halfway through setting the box down when my phone buzzed on the table. He reached for it, then paused when he saw the name. "Do you want me to—" "I've got it," I said. When I stepped into the bedroom, my hands were already shaking. The post looked worse under the warm light. New comments crowded the old ones, some with my wedding photo, some with the news story. I scrolled and stopped on a share from a cousin we hadn't seen in years. "Pray for her parents," she wrote. "She's fine," I said, then swallowed the lie. "We're fine." I made it through the day on muscle memory. Greet, invoice, call the parts warehouse, hold the flashlight, nod at the diagnoses, smile at the pickups. When the last car left, I locked the office door, turned on the bathroom sink to drown the sound, and sat on the floor. The tile was cold through my jeans. I swallowed hard until the shake in my chest turned into a slow, even breath. I stood, splashed water on my face, and went back to clean the counter. I texted my mother that night. Me. "Why are you posting lies?" Mom. "Lies? You left your family. We just told the truth." My thumb hovered over the screen, then typed. Me. "You're ruining my life." Mom. "No. You ruined ours when you chose him." The phone slid out of my hand and hit the rug with a soft thud. Eli stepped into the doorway, picked it up, and read the last line. He set it on the dresser like it was hot. "She's not coming back from this," he said. "Neither am I said, and felt the words land inside me with a weight I recognized. 2 days later, an email came in from a local reporter. "We're covering a family dispute involving a veteran business. Care to comment?" I printed it because paper felt more real than a screen. The ink bled a little where my finger pressed too hard. I laid the page on the office desk, flat and centered. Eli looked at it for a long time. He didn't speak until he was sure I was listening. "They started this in public," he said. "Maybe it's time we finish it the same way." I didn't answer. I opened the office blinds and watched the shop move. Luis wrestling with a tire machine, June carrying a tray of sockets, Carter labeling boxes. The noise settled me. Work always did. That night, after we closed, I set my laptop on the desk and opened a new folder. The cursor blinked. I dragged in screenshots of my mother's post, my aunt's caption, the cousins' shares. I added the text thread from the day I asked for help, the voicemail where my father said, "We're not a bank," the message where my mother wrote, "You made your bed, lie in it." My hand stilled. I clicked save and named the folder with the date. Eli leaned against the doorframe. "You ready?" I nodded. No more silence. The next morning, I replied to the reporter, "We'll give our side of the story, with proof." I hit send and pictured that short sentence crossing the space between us like a straight, clean line. My hands didn't shake. Eli came in, placed his hand over mine, and left it there. "They used shame," he said. "We'll use truth. Then we start now. Now we fight different." Calls kept coming. Some friendly, some nosy. I kept them short. "We'll be sharing soon," I said. "You'll see everything." The street began to treat us like a headline instead of a business. A man I didn't recognize slowed his walk to stare through the open bay door at Eli's sleeve. A woman, pretending to look at her phone, recorded me sweeping the entry. When I looked up, she acted surprised that I'd seen her. I held her gaze until she crossed the street. At lunch, my aunt's name lit the screen. I let it ring out. Then my cousin. Then a blocked number with a voicemail that started with a prayer and ended with an accusation I'd heard my whole life. "You think you're better than your family." I saved it, dragged it to the folder, and labeled it with the time. The smear kept pushing into places it didn't belong. A teenager from the high school wrote on our Google listing, "Don't support people who abandon their parents." I flagged it and kept working. Eli replaced a water pump with the patience of a man. When the last car left and the tools were back in their places, I shut down the computer, turned off the bay lights, and stood in the doorway of the office. The sign out front glowed in the dark, "Iron Hand Auto Repair." A moth banged itself silly against the bulb. The night smelled like hot oil cooling and cut grass from somewhere down the street. I flipped the office light off and felt the shift in the air. The shop held quiet things: wrenches in drawers, a clean floor, notes on the corkboard that told people when to show up and what to do. We had built a life that didn't need applause. We had also become a target for people who did. On the drive home, Eli said, "If this gets worse, we'll be ready." "We already are," I said. He reached across the console and tapped my knee twice, the same sign he used when a bolt finally came loose. I smiled without meaning to, then faced forward, watching the traffic lights tilt from red to green. At home, I filed each piece of proof into a binder. Printed posts, text threads, dates, times. I didn't want to live inside paperwork. I wanted to live inside our work. But lines had been crossed, and lines need fences. When I climbed into bed, my phone buzzed again. A message from a blocked number. "You'll regret this." I put it on Do Not Disturb and slid it under the pillow like a stone. Eli turned toward me and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. "Sleep," he said. "I will." The next morning, we opened like always. The bell rang, the coffee steamed. The first customer of the day handed me keys and said, "You two do good work." I thanked him, and he added, "People talk. I don't listen." He left before I could say more. At lunch, the reporter wrote back with a time and place. I printed the email and placed it under a paperweight, one of Eli's old challenge coins. I stood there a second with my fingers on the coin's edge. Eli came in from the bay, grease on his wrist. "You sure?" he asked. "I'm sure." He nodded. "Then we do it right." I closed the laptop and picked up the broom. The bristles whispered over the floor. The sweep felt like a small reset, a clean pass before the next thing. Eli moved tools into their slots, each clink a tiny answer to a... People kept whispering in places that used to feel safe. The coffee shop down the block, the grocery store bakery aisle. Outside our bays while Eli checked a belt or a hose. I wiped the counter, handed back receipts, and smiled like I didn't hear a thing. Inside, I'd already made a choice. I wasn't ducking anymore. I was done letting other people narrate my life. That night, I sat with Eli in the office after closing. The desk was buried in invoices and a stack of sticky notes with half-finished reminders. He set my laptop in the middle, plugged in the hard drive, and slid a notepad beside it, even though he knew I wouldn't need it. "Ready?" he asked. "Yeah." We opened folders. Screenshots of texts from my mother. The one after our wedding. "You made your bed, lie in it." The one after the first article. "Don't embarrass yourself again." The thread where I asked for a small loan to start the coffee shop and got, "Ask your cripple husband to handle it." I clicked each image and labeled it with the date. I didn't add a single extra word. Eli found old voicemails and hit play through a small speaker. My father's voice came flat. "We're not a bank." Another one where my mother said, "We raised you. Don't be ungrateful." He looked up at me after each clip like he was checking my face for cracks. I didn't give him any. I just nodded and saved. He opened the folder from last month and scrolled to the new posts. My mother's status accusing me of forgetting where I came from. My aunt's caption about selfish children. A cousin's comment, she used them for attention. Eli exported each one and dropped it into a subfolder called Smear. He didn't say the word out loud. He didn't have to. No edits, he said quietly. No revenge, just truth. Only the truth, I said. In the morning, I made an appointment with a local lawyer, a woman in her 40s with a tight ponytail and eyes that didn't blink much. Her office smelled like paper and lemon cleaner. I set the binder on her desk and slid it forward. She flipped through the pages, nodded, and asked short questions. I answered them the same way. "You've been patient long enough," she said at the end. "You have every right to defend yourself." "Will this hurt them?" I asked. "It might." She let that sit. "But sometimes that's what—" Under it, I stacked the proof in order. Screenshots of the texts, transcripts of the voicemails, the email where they asked for $20,000, dated and time-stamped. A short note below each image. From Mom, June 12th, 8:42 p.m. From Dad, April 3rd, 9:10 a.m. When it all fit, I scrolled to the bottom and wrote one last line. I wish it didn't have to come to this. My finger hovered for one breath. Then I hit post. The first 10 minutes were quiet, like the internet was thinking it over. Then a share. Then 3. Then a comment from a woman I barely knew. She warned them. Another one. They really said that to her? And then a flood. Unbelievable. I believed her, Mom. I was wrong. Thank you for posting proof. I needed this for my own life. My hands trembled just enough to make the cursor shiver. Eli set a glass of water next to my elbow and leaned against the counter, watching the numbers climb without saying a word. "Breathe," he said eventually. "I am." An hour later, my inbox turned into a spigot. Apologies from people who'd piled on, notes from strangers who told me their mothers had done the same, offers from a couple of podcasters I ignored. I sat straight, scrolled steadily, and replied to almost no one. The point wasn't the comments. The point was the record. By evening, Ryan took his shot on his page. Some people love attention. Sad. I didn't answer. He didn't need me to. His own comments section took care of it. "You should be ashamed. She posted proof, Ryan. Be a man and apologize." An aunt tried to lighten it with a prayer hand emoji and got roasted. By the next day, my mother had deleted her account. My father went dark. Ryan posted a vague quote about family and then disappeared. On the third day, my phone lit up with my mother's name. The sound cut through the shop like a dropped wrench. I stood in the office doorway holding it while the crew kept moving. Airgun hissing, socket clacking, radio murmuring about the weather. "Want me to take it?" Eli asked from the bay. "I'll handle it," I answered. 2 days later, a small headline sat below the fold of the local paper. Veteran couple defends their name and wins. The article didn't use details it didn't have. It just said we posted proof, the narrative shifted, and the town moved on. They ran a photo of Eli showing Carter how to crimp a connector. It looked boring in the best way. It looked like work. People started calling for good reasons again. Thank yous. Stories that matched ours. A teacher who'd watched her own daughter get iced out by a family that liked appearances more than love. A barber who'd taken in his sister's kid when nobody else would. I printed one message from a woman who wrote in block letters, "You didn't just stand up for yourself. You stood up for everyone who's been silenced by family shame." I taped it next to the register above the worn spot where customers set their keys. The shop fell back into its rhythm. Eli's patience at the lift, June's laugh bouncing off the cinder block wall, Luis humming tunelessly while he stacked tires. I filed receipts and adjusted schedules and answered the phone with the same line I always used. "Iron Hand Auto Repair, how can I help you?" In the afternoon, a man in a suit stopped by with a battery issue and said, "Saw the article. Good for you." He didn't linger. He paid and left. That was the validation I liked. Short, clean, wrapped around an actual repair. At closing, I stood under the awning and watched the evening light hit our sign. Iron Hand Auto Repair glowed steady. Eli came out wiping his hands, that small half-smile on his face that means a job went right. "Feels different now," he said, "because it is." He leaned on the post next to me, eyes on the lot. "Do you regret posting it?" "No," I said. "The truth had to come out." He nodded. We didn't need to map what came next. We locked the bays, flipped the front sign to closed, and turned off the lights in the office one by one. The shop went dark, but the sign outside kept humming. I walked to the curb and looked back through the glass. I could see our reflection in the door. Me, small but upright. Eli, steady and unbothered. Not perfect, not untouchable. Just standing where we said we would. We weren't saints. We weren't martyrs. We were two people. At home, I tucked the binder on a high shelf. Not a trophy, not a threat, just a record. Eli put 2 mugs on the counter and poured tea. We didn't toast. We didn't rehearse lines. He slid a mug across to me and bumped my knuckles with a quiet, "Good work." "Yours too," I said. We sat at the small kitchen table that used to wobble and didn't anymore because Eli fixed it with a shim cut from an old paint stick. The tea cooled while we talked about parts orders and next week's schedule. I didn't reach for my phone once. It buzzed a few times and then gave up, like a guest who finally understood it was time to leave. Before bed, I checked the shop email. 3 new appointments. A thank you from a man who said he'd send his sister our way. An inquiry from a local group asking Eli to speak to their kids about persistence. I wrote back with times that worked and turned off the screen. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I only knew we'd work it like we worked everything else. Hands steady, voices calm, proof ready if anyone asked for it again. But something inside me that had been tight since I was a teenager finally let go. Not joy, not victory, just ease. We turned off the last light. From the window, I could still see the faint glow of our sign, like a small promise sitting out there by itself. I breathed in, breathed out, and let the quiet hold. A week after I posted the proof, the town finally went quiet. No more side glances at the counter, no more "I heard" at the register. The phones kept ringing for the right reasons. Oil changes, brake checks, a rattle at 40 miles an hour. For the first time in months, customers only wanted car talk. I breathed easier moving between bays, passing sockets, signing invoices. The air felt clean. Mid-afternoon, the shop phone buzzed on speaker. Our part-time cashier mouthed "newspaper" and put the call through. A calm voice said, "We'd love to feature your story. The community wants to hear it." I wiped my hands on a towel and stared at the scuffed floor. "I don't know," I said. Eli closed a hood and walked over, sweat on his temple, sleeve neat at his elbow. "It's not about them anymore," he said, quiet enough for me alone. "It's about what we survived." I nodded. "Okay," I told the voice. "We'll do it." The week crept toward the event. I practiced in the office after closing, staring at a blank wall like it held an audience. My voice snagged at the part about our wedding. It dipped again at the text that said, "You made your bed." I tried to smooth the edges until the words felt like my own. "You'll do fine," Eli said from the doorway, legs stretched out, hands linked behind his head. "The truth again, huh? It's the only thing that ever worked for us." A woman from the paper walked us to 2 seats at the front and whispered, "Breathe." I clasped Eli's hand. He squeezed twice and let go. The host stepped to the mic. "Today we honor a couple who taught us what resilience looks like, Eli and his wife." I stood with him because sitting felt wrong. The first applause landed soft, then rolled. Eli ducked his head like he did when someone tipped too much. He spoke first. He never loved microphones, but he kept his voice slow and plain. "I lost my arm in a blast," he said. "I thought my good days were behind me." He looked over at me. Then she held my one hand and said, "We'll build something anyway." So we did. A few people laughed through their throats, the kind of laugh that holds tears. Eli told them about learning to brace a wrench with his hip, about the first time a customer handed us cash and said, "Keep the change." He said, "I don't want pity. I want a fair chance to work." The room nodded like a single person. When he finished, chairs scraped and the crowd stood. The sound hit my chest and shook something loose. I pressed my fingers to my mouth and let myself cry without hiding. We moved to a table for questions. A high school kid asked, "What do you do when people talk?" Eli said, "Work harder than the talk." An older man in a baseball cap asked how to teach grit. I said, "Show up. Every day, especially on the slow ones." A young mom with a baby on her hip asked what she should say to family who don't understand. I glanced at Eli. He nodded. "Say less," I answered. "Say what's true, then live it." After, people lined up to shake hands. A woman in her 70s reached for me with both of hers. "Thank you," she said. "My daughter's husband is a veteran too. You gave her hope." I squeezed her fingers. "That's all we ever wanted. Show it's possible." A man I'd seen at the shop with a limp and a quick grin hugged Eli one-armed and whispered, "Proud of you, brother." A teenager snapped a photo and shoved his phone back in his pocket like he'd caught something alive and didn't want to let it go. When we finally stepped outside, the sky had gone the color of late afternoon. I leaned into Eli's shoulder and laughed while wiping my face with the edge of my sleeve. "You were amazing," I said. "We were," he answered, pulling me in like he meant it. We drove home in an easy quiet. The house smelled like laundry from the morning and machine oil from our clothes. I put water on the stove and checked my phone. A new message sat on the screen from a number I knew by heart. I saw the video. "I'm sorry. You didn't deserve what happened. Can we talk? Ryan." I sat at the kitchen table and read it twice. Eli set 2 mugs down and waited. He didn't tell me what to do. He didn't ask what I wanted. He let the moment breathe. I typed, "I'm glad you're doing okay." I deleted it. I typed, "I can't do this right now." I deleted that too. Then I wrote the first line again and hit send. No anger, no speech, just an open hand that didn't invite more. I stepped onto the small porch. The evening had cooled. Streetlights winked on in a line. Eli came out and draped his jacket over my shoulders. "You thinking about them?" he asked. "A little." "You still miss them?" "Yeah." I let the words sit. "But I think I finally stopped needing them." He nodded. "That's when you really heal." The next week, envelopes began to arrive with our regular mail. No return addresses I recognized, just careful handwriting and forever stamps. I opened one at the counter between customers. A boy in block letters wrote, "My dad lost his arm too. He fixes things like Eli. He taught me to ride my bike." I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. A single mom sent a picture of her tiny bakery, 2 display cases. "You're a local celebrity now," I said, setting the cup on a nearby cart. He slid out, hair mussed, face smudged with honest dirt. "Guess I'll start charging for autographs." $10 a signature, I teased. 20 if they want the smile. I watched him stand and stretch his back. "Do you ever regret any of it?" I asked. He wiped his forehead with his forearm. "Not 1 second," he said. "Every wrong turn led me to you." My eyes filled fast. I didn't hide it. He tapped my chin with a grease-creased finger and grinned like he'd just tightened the last bolt on a tough job. By late afternoon, we wrapped the day. I called parts for Monday, stacked receipts by date, and locked the drawer. Outside, the sun slid lower and put a honey sheen on the sign. Iron Hand Auto Repair glowed as if it had been waiting for this hour. The laughter from the cafe next door drifted over the fence. Someone clapped twice, loud and happy at a joke I didn't hear. I stood at the bay door with Eli and watched a cloud of gnats chase itself in the light. The world quieted into everyday sounds. A bus sighing at the stop, a dog collar jingling, a neighbor dragging a trash bin to the curb. "We made it," I whispered. Eli turned, eyes soft. "No, love. We're just getting started," I laughed under my breath and nodded. He pulled the doors down and slid the locks into place. The shop settled around us with its usual evening creaks. Inside the office, I took a last look at the wall of hope. The boy's letter, the bakery photo, a thank you card from a woman who said she finally left a house that didn't love her back. I traced the edge of the tape with my fingertip and flipped the lights. We walked to the truck. Eli opened my door first, like he always did. I climbed in and buckled, watching him circle around the hood, one sure step after another. The engine turned over on the first try. He patted the dashboard, an old habit he never corrected. We drove past the community center where we'd stood that week, and past the church that hosted our first Customer Appreciation Day. It all looked normal, and that felt right. I didn't want fireworks or a parade. I wanted this, work we could touch and people we could help. At home, we left our boots by the door and our phones on the counter. He filled 2 glasses with water and slid one into my hand. We didn't toast. We didn't make a speech. He clinked his glass against mine once, soft. "To showing up," he said. "To showing up," I echoed. We sat at the tiny kitchen table that no longer wobbled because he'd fixed it with a scrap of wood and a steady hand. We wrote the schedule for next week on the back of an envelope. June off Tuesday, Louise covering tires, Carter shadowing an electrical job. It felt a lot like peace. Before bed, I checked the office email one last time. A school asked if Eli could speak to their shop class about persistence. A church asked if we'd donate an oil change to a fundraiser. I typed, "Yes, happy to help," and sent both replies with a small smile. I turned off the lamp and stood by the window. From there, I could see the faint glow of our sign across the lot. No drama, no noise. Just a steady light on a quiet street. We didn't need permission to be okay. We gave it to ourselves. I slid into bed. Eli reached for my hand in the dark and found it like he always did, without looking, without doubt. I laced my fingers with his and held on. The house was still. The night felt kind. We were not waiting for apology or approval. We were not hungry for applause. We'd learned to live on simpler fuel. Work well done, a name we could stand behind. One good hand holding another. That was enough. A year after the community talk, the days felt sturdy. We had 2 new signs, one in Round Rock, one in San Marcos, and a routine that ran smooth. I walked the main shop before opening, coffee in hand, checking hoses, rags, and the whiteboard schedule. The air carried warm machine smell and that sharp hint of metal. On the office wall, the wall of hope had no space left. Letters overlapped photos. A kid's drawing of a one-handed mechanic held the corner with blue tape. Eli stepped in, cap backward, grin small. "We'll need a bigger wall soon." "That's a good problem to have," I said, and it landed like a quiet prayer. The letter showed up on a slow morning. A delivery guy slid an envelope across the counter and asked for a signature. I saw the handwriting in the corner and felt my chest tighten. I sat. Eli wiped his hands and hovered in the doorway. "You okay?" he asked. "It's from her," I said. He didn't move closer, didn't pull away. I broke the seal and unfolded a single sheet. 2 lines stared up at me. "We're proud of you. Can we visit?" Her name sat beneath it, shaky. That night we ate at the counter. Same stool, same chipped plate with the blue rim. I laid the letter next to the salt shaker and watched the light skim over it. Eli worked on the old field watch he kept fixing and refixing, the one that kept time only when it wanted. "Will you let them visit?" he asked without looking up. "Not yet." He met my eyes. "You don't owe anyone forgiveness." "Maybe one day," I said, "but not because they deserve it. Because I'll be ready." He set the screwdriver down and wrapped me up, chin on my hair. "Then that day, we'll welcome them with peace, not pain." The next morning, I drove to the Round Rock shop. A class from the high school's tech program filled the bay, wide-eyed and loud in that harmless way teenagers are. Eli showed them how to read a code and not panic at the first beep. A boy near the front raised his hand. "How do you do all that with one hand?" Eli grinned. "You don't need both hands. You just need one that won't give up." They laughed, and you could feel the lesson stick. I stood back, arms crossed, pride moving through me like a warm wave. By afternoon, I was at the cafe. It had grown into what I first sketched on napkins: 2 baristas, a small case of pastries, a bulletin board full of local flyers. Photos of veterans Eli had helped ran along one wall with little tags: starter clutch, alternator, brake line. People pointed. People remembered. A woman in a denim jacket stepped up to the counter. "Your husband fixed my car last month. He's incredible." "He's been proving that for years," I said. "You both inspire people." "We just live honestly, that's all." She nodded like that answer had been waiting for her. On my way home, I took the long route, past the old street where we'd started. The rundown apartment had turned into a corner store with bright fruit in crates. Next to its side door, the first sign Eli painted still hung: warped wood, fading letters. Eli Repairs. Honest work, one hand strong. I pulled over and stepped out. The paint flaked under my thumb. The words were rough but true. I smiled. "We did it," I said to no one, and the sound of my voice surprised me with how calm it was. We ate late and sat on the porch. Crickets traded calls from the grass. The porch bulb haloed a small ring of light at our feet. I listened to the kind sounds of a simple block and felt the last tight knot inside me loosen for good. I didn't want an apology carved in marble. I didn't want to go back and fix anything that built this life. I wanted to keep showing up, same as we had when no one clapped. "It wasn't revenge that set me free," I said, voice low. "It was letting go." Eli turned, searching my face like he always does when words mean more than they say. "You okay?" I took him in, the scar, the steady jaw, the easy patience that had grown around us like a fence. The man they called a disgrace. The man who taught me to stop begging for love and start building a home. They called him broken, I said, my voice clear. Turns out he was the strongest one of us all. He squeezed my hand, and we sat with that. No parade, no brass band. Just the two of us and the morning sneaking up at the edge of night. When the first thin light slid across the street, it caught the new metal sign on the shop and the old wooden one in my memory, and for once they told the same story. We stood when it felt right and went in to sleep, ready to open again, ready to keep choosing this: work, truth, and a grip that never lets go. I didn't need their approval. I built my own peace. What would you do if it were your family? Leave a comment. I read every single one.